She thumps a cane and drinks champagne. She's formidable and judgmental, but we can guarantee that she's a quintessential Lady D, who recognizes great potential. What would Danbury do?
Welcome to What Would Danbury Do? Your guide to Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series from A to V. Friends, readers, Bridgerton fans, it finally happened. Netflix released the 8-episode first season of Bridgerton on the 25th of December, and the world went officially bananas. Bananas. As of recording.
Sorry, it's just even when I saw that, I was going to change it because I thought that I would read this. And then I was like, I was going to ad lib and be like, this is so clearly a Kate word. Because you know what? You're supposed to hear it as bananas. You can't put bananas into the script.
I can do it. All right. As of recording, 83 million households have watched the show in the first 28 days, to say nothing of the rewatches. And we know a lot of you are deep into your rewatches. We really, really know. So we couldn't be more excited to dive into the froth, the fantasy, and maybe even the female gaze of Bridgerton on Netflix. Don't forget, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and join the conversation using the hashtag WWDDpod. This episode of What Would Danbury Do is brought to you by The Duke Heist by Erica Ridley, a fantastic choice if you're looking for a new historical series to dive into. Last year, Rudy started reading Erica Ridley's historicals and even recommended one during It's in His Kiss 2, Back in the Habit. So we're incredibly excited to tell you about her newest release. The Duke Heist is the first book in the Wild Winchester series that brings you found families, adventure, and con artistry. Con artistry, but like for a good cause. That's so Australian. Chloe Winchester is utterly forgettable, and she's fine with that. In fact, it's kind of an advantage when you're a thief. But when she sets out to steal back a painting that once belonged to her family, she also accidentally kidnaps the Duke of Faircliff. And suddenly, the girl used to being able to blend into a crowd is discovering what it's like to stand out. They're a low-key enemies to lovers pairing, and I've been having a great time. If you're curious, visit ericaridley.com for a free prequel novella and for more information about the series and the first book, The Duke Heist. Plus, for a limited time, if you purchase The Duke Heist and register your purchase on Erica's website, she'll send you a free bonus novella. Now that's a steal. Now, to Bridgerton. Okay, what happened?
So, let me tell you. First, Daphne is presented to Queen Charlotte, who deems her flawless and cements her as the season's incomparable. Incidentally, right up until this moment, I always thought it was pronounced incomparable, but no, apparently it's incomparable. Simon, the rakish Duke of Hastings, returns to town and is guilt-tripped into attending a ball by his godmother, Lady Danbury. A new scandal sheet written by the mysterious Lady Whistledown takes the ton by a storm. Features beautiful houses, beautiful gowns, questionable fringes, the first of the Featherington fashions, and a mysterious distant cousin from the country with a shocking secret.
So we open on shots of Bath, cleverly disguised as London in 1813, and very weirdly meet the Featheringtons first.
It was the framing shot for a historical. You know that we are in historical times because this woman is being absolutely and ferociously laced into a corset. Shorthand, we're in the past. Witness the corset.
Audiences are like ducklings, and the first thing they see, they think is their mother, so they attach emotionally. So the fact that we see the Featheringtons first is a wild choice.
I'm literally spiraling right now because the character I not necessarily connect with the most, but find the most stimulating is Mrs. Featherington in this whole series.
Because we're ducks.
Oh, it's good to know that I've been manipulated into that. It's not just like Polly Walker's phenomenal job at portraying this woman, but yeah.
And then it's not quite the next shot, because the next shot, then we finally actually do see the Bridgerton clan, although we still kind of don't really know who they are, because we're like speeding through shit very quickly. But the next thing I wanted to point out was we are introduced to a character that is apparently named Anthony and not Anthony, like I have thought my entire fucking life, but all right. So we are introduced to Anthony, but more specifically Anthony's butt, while he is having sex with someone against a tree, and a footman is just like casual standing in the foreground, not looking. I wrote in my notebook, I told you he doesn't fuck, he only has sex, because that doesn't look like she's enjoying herself.
She's up against a fucking tree. Like, that bark is not comfortable. And then he's like, oh crap, I'm late. And then like just starts pounding faster. And I'm like, this is clearly a guy who's only interested in getting himself off, not her.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He's getting a piece while looking at his timepiece.
Also, I feel like we need to add like a little bell for ding, Anthony likes public sex.
Yeah, like where are they?
Hyde Park, I'm guessing. To fuck out
Oh
in
my
Park, then
God.
Hyde Park, I'm guessing.
I didn't pay enough attention. So is what he's wearing while he is having outdoor sex what he then wears to court? Like, did he go home and get changed after that? Or is that he just like pulled up his pants and then went and met with his mother and sister?
I think it's the latter. I mean, I didn't pay close enough attention either, but like it would have taken him a lot of time to go home and get changed.
And he would smell like it anyway.
Well, that kind of brings us into the Queen's Court and each of the debutantes being presented. Is this meant to be Daphne's first season?
Yes.
Right. At which point that would actually, like, unless there is something that I'm missing, should she not be 16?
No, I mean, but she wouldn't be much older than 18. Like, if she was older than 18, then she'd be sort of debuting quite late and people would be wondering.
So how old do we think she is?
I think she must be 18.
Because Book Daphne was 20.
Well, Book Daphne was also on her third season.
Fourth, but yes.
I thought it was her fourth.
Yeah. So Daphne's definitely on her first season because I'm not entirely sure, but I'm reasonably sure that you only get presented to the Queen the first time around. So it's weird that all three Featheringtons would come out at the same time. It would make a lot more sense if, like, the two older Featheringtons had already had their coming out and they were in, like, their second or third seasons, and this was Penelope's.
Even then,
Yeah.
That's a weird choice, because if I've learned anything from Lady Catherine in Pride and Prejudice, it's that it's odd to have a lot of daughters all out at once.
I think it was supposed to be a visual joke and a quick introduction to a lot of characters. If you think about this series, they're introducing, I think, somewhere on the amount of 30 separate characters. It's a lot. So I think it's just an economy of screen.
Look, all right, well, in that case, I'll put a pin in it, but I just want it on record that I'm side-eyeing that choice.
Well, and it also sets up the dichotomy between the Bridgertons and the Featheringtons, like, very neatly. Like, definitely more so than in the book. They're being presented as, like, the two ends of the spectrum in terms of respectability and good taste and, I don't know, happy family life, what success looks like, what influence looks like. Like, the Featheringtons are 100% the foils for the Bridgertons. So to have all three daughters and the one faint after Daphne is called, or just before Daphne is called flawless, like, it's just creating that foil immediately so that we know right away that the Bridgertons are different from the Featheringtons, and the Featheringtons are a bit ridiculous and thus lower in every conceivable manner from the Bridgertons. And
probably also sets up why the Queen would make a point of Daphne being the, incomparable, flawless.
I think for a TV series, particularly one that has 8 episodes to tell the whole story, I think it actually works really well because it sets her up for an enormous fall right in that first episode. So we may not relate to her as a flawless diamond, but we can certainly relate to her as somebody who has expectations of how things are going to be, and then those expectations not working out. And I think it also creates it makes the characters of both Daphne and particularly Antony much sharper. So the conflict is boosted up really quickly. And having Daphne move from, somebody with high hopes to somebody with low hopes, and then recognizing how hopeless and powerless she feels in her situation and doing her best to try and get herself out of it. I think that puts the viewer on side, and it's a much shorter path, I think, than trying to visually show what is essentially an internal conflict, in that everybody thinks that she's a friend and nobody thinks that she's a marriageable woman.
As much as I initially didn't like that this was Daphne's first season and they've aged her down, the function of that is that we are experiencing everything fresh with her, and it gives an opportunity for her to learn something that, as an audience who is possibly, and actually very likely, not used to Regency era romances, we learn the thing with her. So we learn the societal norms, we learn the like we're learning which fork to use at the dinner table, basically. You know what I mean?
It has another function too. It destabilizes people who've read the book series, and knowing that not everything you think is going to happen is going to be completely in line with what you've read before.
I just want to sidetrack us for a moment and tell you a quick story about Debutantes. Because when I was about 19, my mum asked if I would like to have a debut. In my very best baby feminist voice, I said no. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there's a part of me that is like, maybe I should have done it. Because there is this phenomenon among Aboriginal communities to have deb balls. And I think it ties into, I think it's partly connected to being part of a small, regional community where you don't really see, people from other communities all that often. So it's an excuse to have, a massive party and get to meet people from outside.
In my head right now, all I'm doing is picturing Rory Gilmore's deb ball, but with Brody's face.
It's a whole kind of thing in the lead up. So you design and you make your white dress, you organize your partner, and there are definitely some people who are high demand because they can dance, and so they end up partnering a lot of people over the years. And so you go to your dance classes, you go to all these other, it's kind of sweet. But yeah, when I was 18, I was like, no. But a lot of my cousins have done it, and I've been to a lot of theirs, and yeah. But
I mean, is it too late, really?
Look, it's not, because I'm not married, so I could still.
I mean, you lost me in having to make my own dress, but if you've got a dab hand at a sewing machine, then.
My mum's helping me make a dress at the moment, but it's not white, so I can't wear it to my deb ball.
What sort of sprung into my head was Josie Gracie never been kissed, someone well above the age of everybody else doing the thing.
Actually, no. So all right, this is my cutest deb ball story. So because one of the reasons why I think that I probably should have done it is because there was a point where, due to the protection era and segregation in Australia and all this sort of stuff, Aboriginal people were not allowed to participate in a lot of things like this. And this was deb balls were a really prominent part of Australian, particularly rural culture, for a very long time. And so when my nan's sister was in her, I want to say 50s, her and a few of her contemporaries were invited to have a deb ball, and it was 1990 something. They were invited to have their own debut as women who were not allowed to have one when they were younger. So it was the actual cutest. There were all these little old ladies that all came out in beautiful white dresses and had to turn around the ballroom. Isn't that gorgeous? Like,
That's
Yes.
the most beautiful thing I've heard all day.
and it just, and we were like, it's out in like this incredibly small town. So I don't think I'm too old yet. I think like if Annie Glad can do it at 50 something, I can. But yeah, it's one of my favorite memories of her is going to her deb ball.
Just amazing.
But yeah, so just a little something for us. Which means we're about to have a massive tonal shift because the next part of the next part of the series, the next part of the show is Lady Whistledown's first column arrives. I read that it was always a plan to have Julie Andrews say the word bitches, which is fine, but I hated it, which meant that then, because I'm a nightmare, I had to go and look up and double check that it actually made sense to have used the word bitches in context of like a derogatory term to use against women. And it was. It's been used that way since the 1400s. There we go.
I think we have to talk about Simon's arrival on screen.
He definitely has a swagger to the way he uses his physicality to broadcast Simon that there's a confidence or maybe potentially even like a facade that is protecting a very soft heart.
A bravado.
This is also when we like properly get introduced to Lady Danbury, like wonderful, beautiful.
And Simon's like, I'm offering my regrets. And Lady Danbury is like, your regrets are denied. I wrote that down.
And she played it so well. Like, I know we are named after Lady Danbury, but could we have asked for a better actress and portrayal of the Dragon Lady? Like, she's just so nimble in how she, both the dialogue and the depiction of it is so nimbly manipulate Simon. Like, it's effortless, but there's also like caring and warmth there, but also like a sharpness to it that it's so good. It's so good.
She's a woman who knows what she wants, and she is not a woman who is going to be denied.
And so seeing her and like seeing them together, aside from the fact that they're just like, they're so lovely, that was the moment where I went, this is super obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway, that there are family colours. And so the Bridgertons themselves are in like a lot of pastels, but particularly blue and purple. And the Featheringtons have their like incredibly bright greens, yellows, and orange.
Citruses.
Like, yep, yes. And then you get Lady Danbury and Simon Bassett, Duke of Hastings, are wearing these like dark blues and purples, which actually as I say, they match the Bridgertons, but in a richer, bolder
they're more
color.
Jewel tones than pastels.
But they are effectively the same colors.
So in
we
the deeper
pairing them
color
off.
wheel, they are representing their considerable power in the social hierarchy.
Well,
maybe the further down the social hierarchy, the more insipid your coloring.
I was thinking it's more a sign of they sit next to each other on the color wheel as opposed to sitting opposite and being like, because I mean, like I love to clash colors. Like I love an orange and a purple next to each other, but this is like different tones of the same colors that are right there, so we know that we're meant to put them next to each other.
Maybe it's like a purple and an orange is a fling, but a purple and a lilac is true love.
I mean, look, it's just whether you are friends to lovers or an enemies to lovers, I think is where we're going here.
Yeah. We have to mention the top hats that Danbury wears, which is apparently a choice of the actress, like that she would wear, like what is a man's accessory, so she doesn't give a fuck.
The other major character that we're introduced to is Miss Marina Thompson.
Marina's existence this early in the series is a shocker to anybody who has read the books. But what I love about Marina is she kind of moves in a very stiff and less sort of graceful way than all the other girls that had their Queen's debut. And I don't know if that was purposeful or it's just the physicality of the actress. But like there was a sort of
her little awkward
country
curtsy.
aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also defensiveness, like your shoulders being up, which is what I noticed quite a lot, which of course they would be. You've gone to the London for the first time, you are on the market, you're living with the Featheringtons who you've never met before. Of course you'd be like stiff and feeling vulnerable.
When we first met Marina, I actually thought that perhaps the writers were unaware that there was already a Marina in the book series because it was so unexpected and so clearly providing a story that hadn't existed in the source material. And I thought, oh, well, the writers have made a mistake there. There's already a Marina. That's going to be weird later on.
Yeah, like fans of the book will have recognized the fact that Marina has been shifted from being the Bridgerton's cousin to being the cousin of the Featheringtons. And so it is one of those moments where, like, yeah, you kind of go, oh, interesting.
All right, so we're at the ball.
What a damn moment.
Anthony is essentially...
He's thank you nexting everyone.
Everyone. My favorite is he's like, I shall not have you making a life with a poet, heaven forbid.
Yeah, look, there are a lot of choices that Anthony makes that I do not appreciate or respect, but like wholehearted rejection of poets, that it's I am sorry to say that I don't always personally reject poets, but I should. We all should.
I had this thought watching, I've watched the episode twice now. I do kind of like how dickish he is because it allows a bit more nuance in that relationship. But I don't know if he's giving the cut direct, but he's being a real tossback to a lot of people.
I think it goes back to that, I suppose, that tension between who is actually fulfilling their duty to the family. From the outside, Anthony is the head of the family and the one imbued with the responsibility and the honor of having to care for his family. And he trots it out an awful lot. Like, you know, I am head of the family, so I must go to my club and drink whiskey or whatever. And I'm head of the family, so I must show up really early and scare off all of my sister's suitors. But he doesn't actually do anything to help or to he doesn't show any sort of deeper understanding of what that actually means, like what that power actually means. He's just power drunk and completely ignorant of the responsibility behind the power, whereas Daphne, of course, from the outside has no power whatsoever, but she is deeply invested in what she views as her duty and her responsibility, particularly to her sisters.
I mean, and that what you just mentioned, Katie, is reflected in the conversation between Violet and Anthony later on, in that she's like, you can be the man of the house or a brother. And like, he's very much choosing to be the job, 9 to 5, don't give a shit about the job, but I'm just going to get it done. Whereas a brother ideally would have more emotional engagement and want his sister to be both safe and happy.
I don't know. I started to kind of wonder if in that conversation that Violet and Anthony have, do they see the goal for Daphne as being a love match, or do they see the goal for Daphne as being getting married?
I don't know. I actually think that Violet was saying, because I think Violet was acting out of panic in that point. Nobody's showing up in the drawing room anymore. She's not being asked to dance. The scandal sheet that everybody's reading is saying that she, you know, she's untouchable now. So I think Violet is saying, you know, Edmund would have talked to somebody. Yeah. He would have made sure that Daphne wasn't being subjected to this gossip anymore, that she wasn't being subjected to the derision. He would have found somebody suitable, maybe not a love match, but like somebody that she could have been content with, even if she wasn't deliriously happy. Whereas Anthony didn't think that deeply about it. He just went, oh, well, she needs to be married, so let's sign her up for the most ridiculous man in London.
He created the problem in the first place by being such an openly dismissive and rude individual to his peers, which, as a Viscount, isn't in his best interest on a business or a societal level. And the thing is, Edmund wouldn't have done that in the first place. There wouldn't have been a mess to correct.
Very likely, Edmund wouldn't have been watching over Daphne that closely in a ballroom and also openly insulting people.
I mean, he probably would have let Violet do what Violet's supposed to do, which is chaperone Daphne.
Yeah.
You know?
So yeah, we wouldn't have had an empty drawing room, oh noes, while Maroon 5 classicalized. Nothing has made me laugh harder than that song of all songs. Anyway, we have a juxtaposition of Daphne's empty drawing room and the Featheringtons, Miss Marina Thompson's very full, very popular drawing room sort of moment. And people are turning up with flowers and puppies. Were puppies a normal thing to give to people?
Nobody gave me a puppy when I was dating. I feel like I missed out.
Also, don't gift puppies. They're not something you gift. It's quite interesting seeing Mrs. Featherington sort of fall over herself to recognise the strategic value of having someone who is very well received, potentially bringing +1 or the rejected few into the orbit of her daughters who clearly aren't doing very well. And I love that, it has to be pointed out by her, and I'll put friends or frenemies. But what I love about Marina is she kind of moves in a very stiff and less sort of graceful way than all the other girls that had their Queen's debut. And I don't know if that was purposeful or it's just the physicality of the actress. But there was a sort of
her little awkward curtsy.
Aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also defensiveness, your shoulders being up, which is what I noticed quite a lot, which of course they would be. You've gone to London for the first time, you are on the market, you're living with the Featheringtons who you've never met before. Of course you'd be stiff and feeling vulnerable, which makes more and more sense the more we know about Marina. So I thought it was a really good acting choice.
When Nigel Burbrook visits Daphne at home, it's a scene that felt very reminiscent of Mr. Collins' attempt at proposing to Elizabeth Bennet. Right down to the way that Daphne grabs Eloise's hand and tries to keep her from leaving the seat.
It's interesting, actually, because it reminds me of a quote from Jonathan Bailey that I saw in my obsessive scrolling through information about the show, where he said something along the lines of, the show is about toxic masculinity, where you see all of these amazing women making decisions that are so much better than the men. And that ties in.
Who better for that to come from than the actor that is playing Anthony, really?
That plays Anthony, yeah. And it's interesting because you do see the women who are who don't have a great deal of power in their situations, nonetheless showing more sense and understanding of the world than the men who are tasked with making those decisions.
I do understand that this was originally written by an American, but this whole series feels very American in sensibility to me, actually. And it's something I've been sort of pondering about for a while, and that sort of ties into this need. Burbrook in the books is completely stupid, but incredibly sweet. And he's been sort of made into this arch villain like a lot of the Featheringtons have been as well. And I'm was this all completely necessary? Could we have had a bit more nuance?
So Burbrook is interesting because I was watching it and he was hounding Daphne. Is this a moment where they've ruined a goofy character? Or Has Nigel Burbrook always been a villain and I just didn't recognize it because the Me Too movement hadn't happened yet?
No, I'm listening to the Viscount Who Loved Me on audio tape. I'm so old right now. And Burbrook is genuinely just a lovely human being who has no sense or thoughts in his head. He's just like, oh, look, shiny. In terms of talking about it being quite American, but I don't know if this would have existed if it was a completely British production as well. I needed some more levity and joy and fun. Like everything just feels like a lot. Okay,
well, I mean, it's the first episode, right? So they have to set up all the conflict, so that people keep watching.
I totally get that, but like, you know, like I'm just wanting a bit more.
I know what you mean, but I also think that I'm right.
The whole series, yeah.
I'm going to use that going forward. I see what you mean, but also I'm right.
When you encounter a man like Nigel Burbrook, there is a strong argument to be made that that is not a safe character. Like, that's not a safe person. And to dismiss him as goofy is a choice, but it's not a choice that would necessarily be made for a contemporary audience. It's a choice that you can get away with a lot easier in the early 2000s versus now. That said, I miss goofy Nigel Burbrook, and I wanted him to be goofy.
That's what I needed to hear. Also, I'm right.
I really love that Daphne gets supplanted as the season's incomparable, but it is never pitted as a competition between the two of them. Like, there's never any rancor between her and Marina. She never sort of curses Marina or gets upset with Marina. She just sort of looks at it as, this is the situation that I'm in. What can I do about my situation? As opposed to creating one of those so familiar rom-com scenes where it's two women pitted against each other for society's gaze,
which
or
it so easily could have been, and I actually got a bit scared that it might have, because right when Daphne gets first kind of labelled the incomparable of the season, Eloise points out that means that there are 200 other debutantes that are, like, they now have a common enemy, and it is her. Except that it doesn't, like in Marina, it's certainly not playing out.
And I think where Daphne's characterization fell apart a little bit is that they sort of, in this episode in particular, where she talks about, you know, how her success affects everybody else's experiences, and when she's talking to Anthony when they're on horseback with that amazing blue hat, I loved that hat much.
Yeah.
Where she says,
that scene could have been doubled in length, and I would have happily enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that scene between the two actors, and the dialogue was really good. It told you a lot about both of them.
And this is the thing as well. So and Daphne sort of says, you know, this is what I've been trained for. It's the only thing I'm good for, and it sets her up as somebody who is quite intelligent and aware and self-aware and aware of her situation, and I guess frustrated a little bit by it as well. But it doesn't deal with the fact that actually it's what she wants. Like, she's aware that this is the only thing that she's good for, but it also happens to coincide with the things that she really wants, which are to be married and to have a family and to become a mother. And I feel like they could have done that with a little bit more nuance than they did, because it seemed like they were trying to set her up as like a proto-feminist, as a, you know, a self-aware person of her role in society. And I think the viewers could have managed, hey, I recognize that this is my role and it's not necessarily fair, but it happens to slot neatly with who I am and what I want. So I'm not going to frustrate against it too much. I'm going to leave that to my younger sister, who clearly doesn't want the same things. The Daphne that we're shown in the first episode is hyper aware that her behavior and her success on the marriage mart is going to affect all of her sisters. So she feels her duty and tries to dispense of it in a much stronger and more responsible way than Anthony, who's always blustering about his duty and in fact just fucking actresses up against the trees instead of doing what he's supposed to be doing.
Hello, opera singer.
Sorry.
We haven't even talked about Daphne and Simon meeting.
Running into Simon full speed, chest to chest, isn't something I'd, say no to.
Pardon me.
Forgive me. Oh, yes, thank you.
Tell me your name. Your name, sir.
Am I honestly to believe you do not already know my name? If you desire an introduction, madam, I do believe accosting me to be the least civilized of ways.
Accosting you?
Surely they will try anything.
Sir, that is not... This is not... What is your name?
All this necessitates the meeting of minds in Violet and Danbury at the opera.
Oh, yeah, their little scheme about...
Gooseberry pie.
My cook makes great gooseberry pie, which happens to be the favorite. Like, most of this episode I very much enjoyed, but occasionally there would be a scene or a conversation or something where I just feel like this deep cringe, because I would feel like they're trying so hard to do exposition and to tell us things like we like each other, that they actually have dialogue that says we like each other. And I would be like, oh.
Violet does not need to try that hard. Violet, honey, sit down. You do not need to try that hard.
Like, it's the ultimate tell don't show.
Well, and particularly because I think that the actors and the scene itself was doing a pretty good job. Like, they were all teasing each other. They were all having a proper conversation. Like, it was very clear that they were interested in conversing with each other. It wasn't just polite chit chat or whatever. The kids were there at the table as well. Like, it was very, very clear that it was a family dinner. And not only was it a family dinner, but it was a family dinner that was clearly happened so regularly that it wasn't a thing.
You can see shots of Eloise sort of like enjoying the fact that someone was like giving it back to her sister. Like, yeah, I think that was all very delightful.
You could also see that she desperately wanted to interrupt, and she gets a look from Violet that she's not allowed to play.
Oh. And like Francesca is a complete non-event, which is on brand.
Oh, yeah, that is... I am doing a Francesca watch, and I'm fairly sure that is the only line that she's had in this episode. And there we go.
I'm so convinced that Francesca not being very visible in anything is an ongoing joke that started with Quinn. Like, everyone's like, where? Like, I've seen a lot of fans going like, where's Francesca? Who's Francesca? I don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, I just laugh because it's never not been that case. Like, it's an ongoing joke that I find delightful.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the lack of Francesca in this episode makes me feel like it's an Easter egg for book fans. Nothing will convince me otherwise. From the dinner, then we have the Anthony Violet combo, which we have actually talked about quite a lot.
So Anthony is trying to convince Violet like to move off the Simon coupling, basically, because he won't make her happy. At no point has he talked about what makes her Daphne happy. When I first watched this, I thought, oh my God, thank God he's giving a shit about her. But then I realized at that point in the conversation, he'd already tried the carrots of reputation and just like being like accusing his mother of being stubborn at that point to move on to the happiness and the emotive sort of argument. So I'm like, you suck. Like,
I was about to be like, well, he doesn't really know that Simon doesn't want to get married, but he does. He's had a conversation with Simon at their club. Presumably Whites. I don't know. There's a lot of details that I'm filling in just based on like assumptions from having
think
read
it's just our
romance
club.
novels generally.
I do think it's interesting, like, he's supposed to be good friends with Simon, and, like, you know, Simon has money, he has a title now. Apparently he just bangs a lot of, you know, undesirables, but so does Anthony, so that, like, the hypocrisy is real.
So we go from our Anthony Violet convo to Vauxhall, and
Actually, there's something in between. So because Mrs. Featherington's maid deducts from the clean or non-bloodied sheets that there might be a problem, she runs to Mrs. Featherington, who then goes and has a chat to Marina, because it is clear that there is a problem in the house that was foreshadowed by the conversation that Featherington had with Madames, Cowper and henchwoman, as Kate called her, that Portia has not only inherited a fourth daughter who's got more prospects than her three daughters, but there is a bun in the oven.
which, like,
The
no, not the end. That was one of those moments where it was like, I went, oh, that's why Marina was looking at her bed sheets before and having, like, a bit of a meltdown. Like, I didn't understand that moment until...
contextually, that does not work at all.
Nope.
Like, it. I had no idea what was going on. I'm like, she's angry about life. Is she supposed to be? Are they supposed to be
Did she lose
foreshadowing
something?
that she's, like, insane?
Yes.
But it also, you know, we've heard quite a lot about how Daphne's prospects affect her sister's prospects, and that Marina's bun does impact the Featherington sisters, who already were not looking like they were going to make a match. So, I mean, it sets up the stakes quite highly for both households.
It also raised a question for me of, like, do other people have to check their bed sheets to know if their period has started?
I mean,
I start
no.
craving pepperoni pizza 3 days before, so I've got my tell.
Like, I just sort of feel like there are other ways to have figured it out.
I mean, did they have pepperoni pizza back in 1814 or whatever it was?
No, because this is 1813 and pepperoni hadn't been invented until 1815. I don't know.
Touché.
I don't know.
It's Italian, so
Scandalous.
Well, so is the book version of Sienna. She's supposed to be an
Oh my
opera
god.
singer.
Anyway,
yeah, like,
just-
obviously, no, I didn't not checking bed sheets, but clearly she's stressed about it, and so she sort of knows it's not happening during the day and prays that it's going to happen overnight, and then it doesn't.
I think we can imagine she's been waiting probably for a week or two, and it's just like, oh god.
But also,
Like, just hopeful.
It's
Denial.
It's interesting to me, particularly as a foil for what's going to happen with Daphne a little bit later on, that Marina understands what it means that she's not bleeding.
But also, what was I going to say?
She lived on a farm, Kate.
I lived on a farm too, and I never put the two. It's not like the animals wander around with blood hanging out of their butts.
I was getting myself ahead of something that's said in a latter episode, but you know, whatever.
But Marina and anyone else who might be listening, just a quick heads up that sometimes when you get really stressed about stuff, that can cause your period to stop. Or at least be like, you know, like there are a lot of reasons. So
Yeah, and
I
also
feel like
like
there's
they're
going to be a lot of sex ed this season of What Would Danbury Do?
just
they're
occasional.
still really young too. Like they wouldn't necessarily have settled into
Like
a
super
proper
regular.
routine. Yeah.
Oh, do you know what? I've always wanted to share this story, and I do have permission to share this story, particularly because I'm not going to name names. But I have a friend who, keeping in mind that, like, she was in her late 20s. No, she would argue mid-20s when she said this. I have a friend who was talking to me about how she had she was kind of worried because her period was late. And I was like, oh, okay. She was, yeah, because it normally comes on a Monday and it's Wednesday. And I went, what do you mean? And then she explained that it normally comes on a Monday, but it's Wednesday. And it has I was like, so, but it always comes on a Monday. She thought that it was that late meant the day of the week was wrong.
Oh no.
Mid-20s.
Oh.
I've never, so,
Boy.
this is a friend that I regularly have conversations with about that's not how biology works.
I mean, maybe if she was super regular, absolutely 28 days on the dot.
Kate, she didn't.
I know. Okay,
She
I'm
didn't
just
know how many
trying to-
days.
I'm trying here.
I know, but no, it was like if it wasn't a Monday, then it was like, so you think, but then you have to ask the question of does that mean that a Friday means that it's early or late?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? At what point in the week?
Maths now. Yeah.
Because I don't think she'd ever really stepped back and gone, that's not how that works. But and that's not what people mean when they're talking about early or late. No, she went with days of the week. And I can't. Anyway, I've always wanted to tell people that story.
It really speaks to the message that keeping the way your body works from you is just never ends well.
As we go along,
Wow.
I'll continue to share biological facts, truths, if you will. Same way, because I've said some outlandish, very wrong things to her about biology as well, which I might eventually reveal. I don't know. So then Anthony dumps Sienna after his talk with Violet.
Yet another way where he just doesn't bother or think about his responsibility or his duty. He just bounces from one thing to another. No thought, no depth, no consideration. Just my mom said that I wasn't doing the right thing, so I'm just going to ditch you.
Even though a day ago I said I would protect you always.
Our mutual friend, Kat Mayo, was talking about how rakes are a lot more appetizing on the page than when you actually have to watch their behavior and the way that they hurt people.
It's exactly that. It's uncomfortable. You don't like them very much, and it's really callous. Okay.
Vauxhall.
And now we're at Vauxhall. I love this so much. I don't do mind pictures. My mind can't do that. I never knew what Vauxhall looked like, and it was completely wondrous. And the lighting of the lights, that's a bad sentence, but you know what I mean. We're so wonderful. Oh, loved it.
I'm suddenly realizing that Vauxhall is a place that I probably should have been familiar with before now.
It's where everybody goes and gets compromised because of all the dark paths and gardens and stuff.
Like the Dark Walk.
Like the Dark Walk. See how I led us there?
Like a true rake, you have led us to the Dark Walk.
That's right. Me and my rakish ways. Look, Daphne's punch is pretty impressive, given that, it is hard to hit somebody hard enough to get them to pass out. And she doesn't even do the thing where she's like, ow, my hand afterwards, right? She's just
She's not a big woman. Yeah, she's slight. Yeah.
She's like, it's totally cool. I can totally knock out that guy and then not even shake my hand afterward. I'm saying. She's got some badass tendencies we didn't know about.
I love seeing it. Look, I don't particularly feel like the dialogue was particularly strong throughout this episode. It was the showrunner, Chris Van Dusen, who wrote this episode. But there is this line from Simon in the Dark Walk when they're talking. Nigel is passed out on the ground, and they're talking about how she's got her opportunities are basically in the toilet at this point. There's a bit before it, but it's, I do not mock you, I'm being sincere. And it's some of the facade drops and he's just having an authentic moment with her. and that he is impressed with her on some level, and she was deserving of some truth from him in that moment. And I love that as sort of an entry point to their decision to work together to protect him from society's mamas and restore her reputation. And the way Gillian Robinson and the editor worked to mash his discussion of what they were going to do with while they were actually doing it on the dance floor at Vauxhall was really beautiful work, I thought. It was a really nice way to finish the episode.
It's time for
What Would Danbury Do?
Here, we imagine that a character from another favourite book. Oh, we're not reading books anymore. We're watching TV shows, but that's okay. Here we imagine another character from a favourite book is in desperate need for advice and turns to the lady who tells it like it is, Lady Danbury. This week, Lady Althea,
yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what I've been reading, but I also was like, what if I'm wrong?
There is an extra syllable in there, but
Yeah.
I would say Althea.
This week, Lady Althea Swinton from To Love a Scandalous Duke by Liana de la Rosa writes, Dear Lady Danbury, growing up, Declan St. Clair was one of my best friends and our families were extremely close. But some bad investments and alleged embezzlement saw his family fall into disgrace. On the day he left England, we shared harsh words. But he's back now, and with the death of both his father and his brother, he's also suddenly a duke. My father and brother think I should stay away from him, but after all these years, I'm not so sure that it's the right or kind thing to do. What would Danbury do?
Trust your gut.
Yeah.
You've known this person since childhood.
I mean, even if his family did choose to do the wrong thing, I firmly believe that children shouldn't be punished for the actions of their parents.
Agreed.
So if if you're trusting your gut and you think, actually, there's more to the story or, yeah, his father was a douche, but hey, he seems to be okay. There are cycle breakers out there.
Also, we know that Simon's father, the previous Duke of Hastings, was an absolute dickhead and Simon is not. So, we've seen that sometimes the apple does fall very far from the tree.
And sometimes, the apple can fall close to the tree, but then, the apple shows some self-awareness and does the work and, rolls away from the tree.
I love this analogy.
Althea should 100% have a good conversation with Declan and then, yeah.
Also, are you kidding? He's a duke. There aren't many of those.
It's true. Her father and brother can, go suck eggs when she's a duchess. Rudy, why did you choose To Love a Scandalous Duke to share with us today?
Can I just say, speaking of apples, apparently they are one of the few plants where, each apple is genetically unique.
Huh.
So the
Who's
reason...
fucking doing DNA testing on apples?
I don't know. But the reason that they taste the way that they do is obviously through evolution and natural selection, but it's not natural selection of humans necessarily. Natural selection of bears. Bears determined the taste of apples because they used to eat a lot of apples and then they would
poop out the
seeds, seeds and then and then those would grow and it was there you go. So also some humans, but humans and bears collectively have made apples taste the way they do.
This is such a Sir Philip conversation. Bears and apples, oh my,
Yeah. So that's something I learned that has nothing to do with why I'm recommending this book. Because the reason I'm recommending this book, I just wanted to put it out there because I just thought it was really interesting. And we were talking about apples that became self-aware. So I thought,
That's
there you
true,
go.
Yeah.
So the reason that I'm recommending this book is that I know that there are people who are new to the romance genre, new to the Bridgerton series, and they've come to it through watching the series on Netflix, and then they get really excited and they go and pick up The Duke and I by Julia Quinn and go, wait a minute, Simon's white. And that might be a little bit of a shock if you've been watching the show but not reading the book. So I thought, here is a book that has a canonically black duke. Unlike Simon, his father was white and it's actually his mother that was black. She was his father's second wife, so his brother was also white. And he's very much like kind of a bit alone in a sea of people not like him. So I'm going to give a heads up that if you are hoping to avoid on the page racism, this is not the book for you. It's quite forthright in the kinds of prejudices a black duke would have to deal with. But childhood friends that find love, they're also characters that have opposing goals, because Declan is not super sure that his father was the one who did the embezzling, and that perhaps, actually, Althea needs to open her eyes a little bit more about her own family's behaviour. Her family's apples maybe also need to develop some self-awareness. It's got a bit of tension, it's got a bit of angst, but it also, it's a romance novel that I really enjoyed.
I love the childhood two lovers trope so much, and even better if it's like an older brother scenario. But anyway, not your own older brother, obviously.
God.
That's a whole other trope.
I'm not into that, even if it's stepbrothers. Ugh. Yeah, I really love childhood friends, so it definitely sounds something that's way up my apple tree.
It's one of those things where it's like it gave me sort of feelings of Sarah Maclean's 9 Rules
To Break.
9 Rules to Break,
Monroe.
which is like
Romancing a Break.
A Rake, from Romancing a Rake, yeah.
Yeah. So that's one where it's like there's a bit of a revenge plot going on. There's a lot going on. But something we were thinking about doing was that going forward, because it's been so fun to do these letters and to recommend books, then we kind of put it out there.
If there are other characters out there that you feel need Lady Danbury's advice, then we would love some What Would Danbury Do's from you guys, from our community.
That's all for this episode of What Would Danbury Do? We'll be back in a fortnight to discuss episode 2, Shock and Delight. Over Christmas, we were put in Instagram jail, so our new Instagram is now at WWDDpod. You can still find us on Twitter at BridgertonPod. Send us an email at bridgertonpod@gmail.com or join the conversation on the hashtag WWDDpod. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded land of the Gadigal, Wurundjeri and Bunurong people and edited by audio producer Rudio. Do it again!
Radio on the radio.
Rudy on the radio. Okay. And edited by audio producer Rudy Bremer on Gadigal Country. Thanks for listening, and remember, WWDD. What Would Danbury Do is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.